The year is 1177. Jerusalem bleeds. The holy city stands defiant but vulnerable, a beacon of Christendom surrounded by gathering darkness. Saladin, the brilliant Kurdish general, has accomplished what seemed impossible. He has united the fractured Muslim world under a single banner, forging disparate kingdoms and warring factions into an instrument of focused purpose. Egypt bends to his will. Damascus answers his call. Syria marches at his command. Now he rides north with a force so vast it seems to darken the very horizon itself. Mamluk cavalry, their armor glinting like scales on some ancient serpent, stretch across the landscape in disciplined formations. Kurdish horsemen, fierce riders born in mountain passes and tempered by endless warfare, fill the ranks with savage efficiency. Infantry, hardened by years of desert war, march in columns that seem to have no end. Scouts count the banners and return with faces drained of color. Supply trains extend for miles. War machines creak forward on massive wheels. This is not a raid. This is conquest. Every report that reaches Jerusalem agrees on one terrible truth. The kingdom cannot meet Saladin in the open field. The numbers are too overwhelming, the disparity too great. To march out would be to invite annihilation. Saladin is 39 years old, brilliant beyond measure, patient as stone. He has spent years preparing for this moment. He has burned the coastal towns methodically, testing their defenses, measuring their resolve. He has probed every garrison, studied every weakness, mapped every road. He knows the terrain better than most Christian commanders. He knows the political divisions that fracture the Crusader kingdoms. He knows that fear is as potent a weapon as any blade. And now, with everything aligned, he turns his full attention toward Jerusalem itself. The holy city waits, weak and divided, led by a king who is barely more than a child, a king whose body is ravaged by the cruelest disease known to mankind. Inside Jerusalem's walls, panic spreads like wildfire through dry grass. Messengers arrive hourly with worse news than the last. Saladin's vanguard has been spotted. His army moves with terrifying speed. The northern garrisons report they are pinned down, unable to provide reinforcement. Most of the kingdom's fighting strength is deployed far away, scattered across distant fortresses, unable to concentrate in time to make any difference. King Baldwin IV surveys the situation with clear eyes. He has perhaps 300 knights within the city, many of them young and untested, a few thousand infantry, mostly garrison troops and local militia. Against Saladin's tens of thousands, the mathematics of war offer only one conclusion: the end is certain. Then the king rises from his throne. Baldwin IV, 16 years old, his young body already ravaged by the horror of leprosy. His hands are numb, wrapped in bandages to hide the damage. His fingers can barely grip a sword. Lesions cover his face, forcing him to wear cloth coverings to spare others the sight. This is a boy who should be confined to his chambers, perhaps to his bed, waiting for the disease to complete its inevitable work. Instead, he stands before his assembled nobles with spine straight and voice clear. "We ride today, every man who can sit a horse." The nobles stare in disbelief. Some exchange glances of concern, others of naked fear. A dying king proposing to lead them against Saladin himself? 300 knights against countless thousands? The greatest military mind of the age against a teenager whose body is falling apart? Baldwin does not wait for their approval. He does not seek their permission. He is the anointed king of Jerusalem, and he has made his decision. Bring my armor, bring my horse, and bring the true cross." In that moment, the nobles begin to understand something profound. This is not the desperate gamble of a boy too young to know better. This is not ignorance of the odds. Baldwin understands exactly what he faces. He comprehends the overwhelming disparity in numbers, the tactical genius of his opponent, the seeming impossibility of victory. But he also understands what fear has made the others forget. When darkness comes for everything you love, you do not count the odds. You do not calculate probabilities. You charge, sit straight in the saddle, armor concealing the bandages that cover most of his body. He rides because he is the king. He rides because Jerusalem is his to defend. He rides because to hide behind walls while his kingdom burns would be to betray everything his crown represents. The gates open, the column rides forth, and Jerusalem holds its breath. Baldwin reaches Ascalon the same day Saladin's vanguard arrives. The coastal fortress stands defiant, its walls solid, its garrison ready. The king's scouts report the overwhelming numbers approaching, a tide of men and horses that seems endless. Baldwin advances toward the enemy, his commanders beside him, and for a moment it seems he might engage. Then he sees the full scope of Saladin's force spreading across the landscape, and tactical reality asserts itself. To fight here in the open would be suicide. The numbers are too overwhelming. His small force would be swallowed whole. He withdraws into Ascalon's walls. The gates close behind him. The defenders man the battlements, watching as Saladin's army flows past like a dark river. Saladin sees the young king retreating into the fortress and permits himself a slight smile. The boy is finished, trapped in a coastal city, while the road to Jerusalem lies open. He has more important objectives than reducing a single fortress. Let the child king cower behind stone walls. Jerusalem awaits. The Sultan's army scatters across the countryside with the confidence of certain victory. Units spread out for miles, raiding villages, plundering farms, gathering supplies with leisurely efficiency. The soldiers are relaxed, laughing, confident. No Christian force exists that can threaten them now. The campaign is essentially over. All that remains is the inevitable march to Jerusalem and the final siege. But Saladin has made a critical error. He has underestimated the dying boy trapped in Ascalon. He has assumed that retreat means defeat, that withdrawal indicates broken spirit. Baldwin is not finished. He is gathering strength. From within Ascalon's walls, Baldwin issues the arriere ban, an ancient feudal summons that calls every able-bodied Christian to arms. This is not a request. This is the king commanding his subjects to defend their realm. The proclamation goes forth on swift horses, carried to every village, every farm, every garrison within reach. The response astonishes even Baldwin's most optimistic advisers. Templars break out from Gaza, fighting through enemy patrols to join their king. Knights emerge from isolated fortresses, bringing their retainers and equipment. Burgesses, the free citizens of the crusader towns, flood to his banner with whatever weapons they can carry. Pilgrims who came to the Holy Land seeking redemption volunteer for a different kind of service. Sergeants at arms, experienced soldiers who serve the great lords, arrive in companies. By the time Baldwin rides north again, he commands perhaps 500 knights and several thousand infantry. Still dramatically outnumbered, still facing odds that would make any reasonable commander despair, but no longer alone, no longer helpless. The force that assembles is motley but determined. Alongside the disciplined Templars ride secular knights from a dozen different territories. Alongside professional soldiers march farmers carrying spears. They have nothing in common except their faith and their refusal to surrender Jerusalem without a fight. Baldwin addresses them from horseback, his voice carrying across the assembled ranks. He does not promise victory. He does not minimize the danger. He simply tells them the truth. Saladin believes the kingdom is broken, that Christian resolve has failed. He believes God has abandoned Jerusalem. Let us show him how profoundly wrong he is. Then the scouts arrive with intelligence that changes everything. Saladin's army is stretched across miles of countryside. His confidence has led to carelessness. Small detachments raid independently, spread thin across the landscape. Others march in loose formations toward Jerusalem, maintaining only minimal security. The great Sultan himself camps near the village of Montgisard with perhaps 5,000 to 8,000 men. A significant force, but only a fraction of his total strength. More importantly, they are unprepared, complacent. They have seen no Christian forces of consequence. They expect no threat. Baldwin sees the opening instantly, his young mind grasping the tactical opportunity with startling clarity. Where is Saladin? Near Montgisard, my lord, 5,000 to 8,000 with him, unprepared. Then that is where we go. His commanders protest. Even with their reinforcements, they are still outnumbered, potentially 10 to 1. To attack Saladin directly seems like madness. But Baldwin has already calculated the alternatives. To retreat to Jerusalem is to invite siege. To wait for Saladin to concentrate his forces is to guarantee defeat. Their only chance, their single opportunity, lies in striking before the enemy can reunite his scattered army. It is madness, yes, but madness with hope is infinitely better than certain death behind Jerusalem's walls. They march east, moving quickly, using terrain to mask their approach. The army travels light, abandoning supply wagons that would slow them. Every man knows this is a desperate gamble. Many will not survive the day, but they march anyway, because their king leads them and because Jerusalem depends on them. As the afternoon light begins to fade on November 25, 1177, the Christian army reaches high ground overlooking a broad valley. Below them, sprawled across the landscape with the casual confidence of victors, lies Saladin's camp. It is a scene of startling vulnerability. Cooking fires burn unguarded. Horses stand unsaddled, grazing freely. Men eat and laugh, weapons set aside, armor removed. Some sleep in the open, others practice with bows. Casual competition rather than serious preparation. Supply wagons sit unprotected. Sentries, if they exist at all, watch for nothing. They believe no Christian force is within miles. They believe the campaign is won. They are catastrophically wrong. Baldwin dismounts carefully, his movements stiff with pain and exhaustion. His legs tremble beneath him, but he forces himself to kneel. Around him, his knights kneel as well, a wave of armored men lowering themselves to the earth. The true cross is raised high, the most sacred relic in Christendom, said to contain wood from the cross upon which Christ died. They pray, not for victory, because victory seems impossibly distant. They pray for strength to do what must be done. They pray for courage to face the overwhelming odds. They pray for Jerusalem, for their families, for the faith they serve. The prayers rise softly, hundreds of voices murmuring in Latin, in French, in the various tongues of Christendom. When they rise, Baldwin's voice cuts through the evening air, clear and strong despite his ravaged body. Below this hill lies the man who will destroy everything we love. He believes God has abandoned us. He believes we are too weak, too broken, too fearful to challenge him. Let us show him how utterly, completely wrong he is. Baldwin mounts his horse with help from his squires. Pain lances through him with every movement, but he settles into the saddle and takes up his sword. Around him, the Templars tighten into their characteristic wedge formation, the devastating shock tactic they have perfected through years of warfare. Lances lower with practiced precision. Armor gleams in the fading light, catching the last rays of the setting sun. At the very tip of the wedge rides a 16-year-old boy whose body is failing him with every passing hour, but whose spirit refuses to acknowledge defeat. As the sky darkens from gold to purple to deepening blue, Baldwin raises his sword toward heaven. The metal catches the dying light, seeming to glow with inner fire. The thunder begins. They come down the ridge like the wrath of God made manifest. Not at a wild gallop, not yet. This is a controlled descent, every movement calculated, every rider maintaining exact position. Horses step carefully on the slope, trained war horses that know their business, carrying armored knights who have spent lifetimes preparing for this moment. Every rider sits steady in the saddle. Every horse moves like a drawn bow waiting to release. In the valley below, the first Muslim soldiers notice movement on the ridge. Confusion ripples through the camp. Men point. Questions are shouted. For a long heartbeat, no one moves. No one quite believes what they are seeing. There should be no Christian army within miles. This must be a scouting party, a small patrol that has wandered too close. Then someone with keener eyes or sharper instincts recognizes the formation, sees the massed lances, counts the hundreds of riders, and the first shout of alarm rises, thin and disbelieving, but urgent. The Templar wedge tightens further, converging into a dense point of steel and horseflesh. Baldwin lowers his sword from vertical to horizontal, the signal his knights have been waiting for. The world explodes into motion. The careful trot becomes a canter. The canter accelerates into a thunderous gallop. The sound rolls across the valley like a physical force, a storm breaking open the sky itself. Armor rattles and clangs. Hooves hammer the earth in rhythmic thunder that seems to shake the ground. Lances drop into perfect unison, a forest of sharpened steel all pointing toward the same objective. The camp erupts into chaos. Archers scramble for their bows, fumbling with quivers. Cavalry frantically try to mount horses that are unsaddled and scattered. Officers scream orders that vanish beneath the overwhelming roar of the charge. Men run in every direction, some toward weapons, some toward the threat, many simply away from the terrifying sound bearing down on them. The Templar wedge crosses the valley floor at full speed, a wall of armored destruction, moving with unstoppable momentum. The sound alone is enough to freeze men's blood. Hundreds of tons of armored knights and war horses moving as one, focused on a single point of impact. The collision is instant and absolute. The first line of Saladin's forward troops doesn't break or scatter or retreat. They are simply removed from existence as a fighting force, swept aside by a wall of steel and horseflesh, moving with the accumulated force of the entire charge. Shields fly from hands as if yanked by invisible ropes. Riders topple like wheat under a scythe, their horses bowled over by the sheer mass of the impact. Men are thrown backwards, trampled, scattered like leaves before a gale. Lances punch through shields and mail with horrifying efficiency. Wood splinters, metal tears. The lances, many of them broken by the initial impact, are discarded instantly as riders' hands flash to swords. Blades leap into motion, rising and falling in practiced arcs, each strike aimed with deadly precision. The Templars crash through the disorganized Muslim front line like a heated blade slicing through wax. This is not the graceful combat of romantic legend. This is violent, brutal efficiency, a military formation specifically designed for maximum shock effect, tearing through men who have no time to brace, no time to form ranks, no time to do anything except die or flee. Odo de Saint-Amand, the Templar Grand Master, rides at the heart of the wedge. His voice is lost in the deafening roar, but his presence guides the formation like a keel through water. His sword rises, falls, rises again, each movement economical and purposeful. Nothing is wasted. Every strike serves the formation's momentum. Around him, his brother Templars fight with the same disciplined ferocity, warrior monks who have devoted their lives to this exact purpose. Baldwin rides just behind the tip of the wedge, positioned where a king should be, close enough to inspire, far enough back to be protected by his finest warriors. Pain claws at him with every jolt of the saddle. His disease-ravaged hands can barely maintain their grip on sword and reins. But the charge carries him, lifts him beyond the limitations of his failing flesh, transforms him into something larger than one fragile body. The setting sun catches his raised sword, and for a moment the blade seems to blaze with white-hot light, a beacon in the growing darkness. A cluster of Kurdish cavalry, more disciplined than the first line, attempts a countercharge from the flank. They are experienced warriors, skilled horsemen who have fought in countless battles. But they are too late. The geometry is wrong. The Templar wedge strikes them at an angle before they can build momentum, ripping straight through their formation with barely a pause. Horses twist aside, their riders fighting to maintain control. Men spin from saddles. The careful formation collapses into individual struggles that are quickly swallowed by the Christian momentum. A few Kurdish warriors manage to land strikes, blades glancing off armor, bouncing from shields, finding gaps here and there. Blood flows, men grunt with pain. But the casualties are absorbed by the formation's mass, pushed back, overwhelmed, consumed by the relentless forward pressure. The Muslim camp dissolves into pandemonium. Tents collapse under the press of panicked men. Camels, terrified by the noise and chaos, bolt in all directions, adding to the confusion. Supply carts overturn, spilling their contents across the ground, where they become obstacles and hazards. Shouts turn to roars. Roars dissolve into undifferentiated panic. The Christians don't slow. They press deeper into the camp, the wedge carving lanes through the disorganized defenders, splitting units apart faster than they can form any coherent response. Every moment of hesitation by the Muslims is exploited. Every gap in their lines is widened. The Templars fight with terrifying efficiency, each knight supporting his brothers, the formation functioning like a single organism devoted entirely to destruction. Saladin appears at last, emerging from his tent surrounded by his personal guard. For a moment, the great Sultan stands frozen in astonishment. This should not be happening. No Christian force should be here. No army should have reached his camp undetected. The boy king should be cowering in Ascalon or fleeing to Jerusalem. Yet here they are, a Templar wedge tearing through his army like a sword through silk. Saladin's guards physically drag him back as the wedge tears closer, screaming at him to mount, to flee, to preserve himself. But Saladin is no coward. He attempts to rally his men, his voice cutting through the chaos with the authority of years of command. Around him, officers take up the cry, trying to impose order on chaos. For a moment, it seems to work. Disciplined soldiers respond to familiar voices, familiar commands. Units begin to coalesce, pulling back from the immediate threat, forming defensive positions. But shock has already hollowed them. No one expected an attack here, at this moment, in this manner. No one expected 500 to assault 5,000 with such devastating fury. No one expected the Christians to move with such coordinated violence, such absolute commitment to the charge. The Templars hit Saladin's personal guard with full force. Here, finally, is genuine resistance. These are the Sultan's elite warriors, men chosen for skill and courage, equipped with the finest armor and weapons. They lock shields in a wall, leaning into their spears, absorbing the full weight of the Templar charge with desperate determination. Horses rear, their riders fighting to control them. Knights slam shields into faces, crushing bone beneath steel rims. Swords find gaps between shields, probing, testing, killing. The wedge bunches tight as pressure mounts from all sides, Muslim reinforcements rushing to defend their sultan. For a long moment, the momentum falters. Not breaking, not failing, but tightening. The wedge compressing into a dense mass of struggling men and horses, a grinding engine of steel where every inch is contested, every moment balanced on a knife's edge. Blood slicks the ground. Men scream. Metal shrieks against metal. This is the crisis point where battles are decided, where formation and discipline matter more than individual courage. Then the break happens. Not dramatic, not announced by horns or drums, just the sudden inward collapse of Saladin's guard as a single critical gap opens. Perhaps a shield is knocked aside by a particularly powerful blow. Perhaps a horse stumbles, creating a momentary weakness. Perhaps simple exhaustion makes one defender lower his spear a fraction too far. The Templars see it instantly and take it without hesitation. They push through the gap like water through a cracked dam, widening it, exploiting it, turning a minor weakness into a catastrophic breach. The guard folds inward. The protective circle around Saladin dissolves like morning mist. The Sultan is pulled onto a camel by his surviving guards and rushed away from the fighting. His personal standard disappears into the darkness as his protection scatters before the Christian assault. The Templars carve straight through the center of what was Saladin's command post, scattering officers, overturning the instruments of command. The collapse is immediate and total. With their sultan fleeing and their elite guard broken, Muslim units lose all cohesion. They flee in every direction, north, south, east, west, dropping shields and weapons to run faster. Commanders shout desperately to regroup, to form new lines, but the valley is already lost. The impossible has occurred. 500 men attacking an army 10 times their number have shattered it in a single devastating charge. The Christians do not pursue far into the darkness. They don't need to. The valley is already breaking beneath them, Saladin's confident invasion force reduced to scattered bands of fleeing men. Smoke hangs low over Montgisard as night fully descends. What was once Saladin's well-organized camp is now a chaotic landscape of overturned wagons, collapsed tents, abandoned equipment, and bodies. So many bodies. Small pockets of resistance still attempt to form on the distant rises. Knots of Kurdish cavalry regroup in the darkness. Desperate archers position themselves behind overturned carts, hoping to inflict casualties on any pursuers. But every attempt collapses the moment the Christians turn their attention toward it. No formation can stand. No line holds long enough to matter. Odo de Saint-Amand pulls the Templars tighter, his commands cutting through the aftermath with the same authority they held during the charge. Discipline replaces fury. The wild momentum of the attack gives way to controlled occupation. Horses slow from gallop to walk. The thunder fades to the quieter sounds of victory, groaning wounded, crackling fires, the distant sound of fleeing enemy soldiers. At the center of it all rides Baldwin, or tries to. Every jolt of the saddle sends fresh agony ripping through his disease-ravaged body. His right arm trembles violently each time he tries to lift his sword. His vision blurs and darkens at the edges. The reins slip through fingers that have lost almost all sensation. He sways once in the saddle, catches himself, sways again, overcorrects. Then, inevitably, he falls. Two Templars catch him before he hits the ground, lowering him gently onto a cloak spread across the earth. Dust clings to his bandaged face. His eyes are closed. His breathing is shallow and irregular. He lies absolutely still, too pale, too motionless. For a terrible moment, the valley holds its breath. The king cannot die now. Not after this impossible victory. Not after leading them through the darkness into the light. Then his eyes flicker open, searching the faces gathered around him with desperate focus. Did we win? Odo de Saint-Amand kneels beside his king and this hardened warrior monk, who has fought in dozens of battles and shown no emotion on countless fields of slaughter, finds his voice breaking. Yes, my king, you shattered them. Baldwin's eyes close again, and this time there is peace in his expression. He has done what he needed to do. The rest can wait. Dawn breaks over Montgisard with the cold clarity of winter light. The sun reveals the full scope of what occurred in the darkness and the terrible price that was paid for it. Bodies lie everywhere. Christian and Muslim dead intermingle in the grotesque democracy of the battlefield. The wounded cry out for water, for help, for mercy. Chaplains move among them, offering what comfort they can, speaking prayers over those too far gone to save. The Hospitaller Grand Master, Roger de Moulins, will later submit a careful report to Jerusalem. 200 men killed, 750 wounded, many of them grievously. These are devastating casualties for such a small force, more than a third of the army that charged into the valley. Yet against the complete destruction of Saladin's invasion, against the salvation of Jerusalem itself, it is a price the kingdom can bear, must bear. The surviving Christians walk among the fallen in the strengthening light. They close the eyes of brothers who will never see another sunrise. They speak prayers over bodies still warm. They cut emblems and tokens to return to distant families who will grieve men they will never see again. These soldiers who bled for Jerusalem now rest in the land they saved. They died far from home, in a country many of them had seen only months before. But they died free. They died victorious. They died knowing their sacrifice mattered. Baldwin wakes with the sunrise. His physicians have worked through the entire night trying to save him, applying every treatment they know, every remedy in their considerable experience. They cannot understand how he survived the charge itself, much less hours of combat, with a disease that should have left him bedridden years ago. They wrap fresh bandages with gentle hands, mix medicines with ingredients brought from distant lands, and know in their hearts that they are simply delaying the inevitable. But Baldwin insists on standing, on walking, on seeing his men. The physicians try to stop him, citing medical necessity, royal duty to preserve himself, basic human limits. He will not be stopped. He is the king, and his men need to see that he lives, that their sacrifice was not made for a corpse. He limps through the camp supported by squires. His legs barely hold him. Every step is agony. But he walks. His knights see him coming and fall silent. Word spreads faster than he can move. Men emerge from tents, rise from where they sit tending wounds, turn from their morning duties. They watch this boy who refuses to die, this king who defies every limitation his body demands. He stops before each group of soldiers, thanks them personally, his voice soft but clear, calls them brothers and means it, tells them they have saved Jerusalem, saved Christendom, saved everything that matters. Men who face death without flinching find tears running down their faces. The true cross is raised high in the morning light. Masses are said over the battlefield, priests speaking the ancient words over ground soaked with blood. Voices rise in hymns that carry across the killing fields, Latin phrases of praise and thanksgiving echoing where screams filled the air just hours before. Word spreads across the Levant faster than the swiftest horse can carry it. Merchants on the trade routes hear it first and carry it to every port. Pilgrims spread it through every church and monastery. Soldiers tell it in every garrison from Antioch to Alexandria. Saladin's army destroyed. The invincible sultan humiliated. The leper king triumphant. The impossible has occurred, and everyone must know. When Baldwin rides through the Damascus gate back into Jerusalem, the entire population waits. They have been gathering since word arrived of the victory, but now they see the reality of it. Their king, 16 years old, wrapped head to toe in bandages that cannot fully hide the ravages of his disease, barely able to sit his horse, supported by squires who walk alongside, ready to catch him if he falls. Behind him, battered knights who look like they have ridden through the very gates of hell and somehow emerged on the other side. This is what victory looks like, not glorious, not beautiful, painful and costly and terrible. The crowd's celebration catches in their throats. They had prepared cheers and songs and jubilation. Instead, they line the streets in near silence. Faces are lowered in respect that borders on reverence. Tears flow that cannot be held back, because every person watching understands the cost of what they are witnessing. Their king is dying, has been dying, will continue dying, but he spent what life remains to him in their defense. The king is carried carefully to his chambers, his physicians hovering with deep concern. The exertion of the battle and the ride back has accelerated the disease's progression. The wounds that had begun to heal have reopened. New lesions have appeared. The damage to his body is catastrophic. But Baldwin does not complain, does not rage against the unfairness of it. He has done what he was born to do, what God placed him on earth to accomplish. He led his people when they needed him most. The rest is in heaven's hands. In Damascus, Saladin retreats to lick his wounds. Physically, he is unharmed. His guards succeeded in getting him away before the Templars could reach him. But the wound to his pride, to his reputation, to his image of invincibility, that wound will never fully heal. He will campaign for another 10 years, will win great victories, will eventually take Jerusalem in 1187 after Baldwin's death, removes the kingdom's greatest defender, will become legend throughout the Islamic world and grudgingly respected even in Christendom. But Montgisard haunts him. In quiet moments, the memory returns unbidden, the surprise attack that should not have been possible, his army broken by a force he had dismissed as no threat, the humiliation of fleeing before a teenage boy. His chroniclers will minimize the defeat, attributing it to chance, to unfortunate circumstances, to anything except the simple truth. He was outfought by a dying child. Without Montgisard, Saladin would have taken Jerusalem in 1177. The entire trajectory of history, the balance of power in the Levant, the ultimate fate of the Crusader kingdoms, all of it pivoted on that one afternoon, on one dying boy's refusal to accept defeat, on several hundred knights charging an army many times their size. Baldwin IV rules for 8 more years after Montgisard. Each year sees his body deteriorate further, the leprosy claiming more of his physical self. By 1185, he can barely walk. His face has become unrecognizable, the disease having destroyed his features so thoroughly that he must wear a silver mask in public audiences. His hands are useless, forcing him to conduct the business of kingship through dictation. Yet he rules until the very end. His mind remains sharp even as his body fails. He manages the complex politics of the kingdom, balances competing noble factions, maintains diplomatic relations with distant powers, and above all, keeps Saladin at bay through a combination of military skill and sheer force of will. When death finally claims him in 1185, Baldwin is 24 years old. He has been dying for 15 years, living with a disease that should have killed him many times over. Those who loved him feel relief mixed with their grief because watching him suffer has been its own form of agony. But his legacy lives forever. The leper king. The boy who should have been helpless became the warrior who saved Jerusalem, who taught the world that strength is not measured in flesh, that courage does not require a perfect body, that the human spirit can transcend any physical limitation. The Battle of Montgisard becomes legend almost immediately. Chronicles record it with barely concealed disbelief. A teenage king afflicted with the most feared disease of the age, leading outnumbered forces to victory through surprise, tactical brilliance, and absolute refusal to surrender. Every military mind said it was impossible. They did it anyway, because Baldwin refused to count the cost, because the Templars refused to measure the odds, because thousands of men refused to let darkness win without giving everything they had in resistance. Centuries pass, kingdoms rise and fall. The Crusader states eventually collapse. Jerusalem changes hands again and again. But the story endures. When men speak of impossible victories snatched from certain defeat, they speak of Montgisard. When generals study battles that defy every military principle yet succeed anyway, they study Montgisard. When ordinary people facing overwhelming obstacles wonder if perseverance matters, if courage can truly change outcomes, they remember Baldwin. the leper king who proved that the human spirit, when forged in determination and tempered in the fires of adversity, can overcome any obstacle the world places in its path. This was the miracle of Montgisard, not a supernatural intervention, but the natural result of courage meeting necessity, of a dying boy becoming a legend, of the impossible becoming history through sheer force of will. This was Europa Rise, where the past still rides, where legends are born in blood and dust and desperate courage, where 16-year-old kings teach eternal lessons about the nature of strength. And the lesson rings across the centuries. When all seems lost, when darkness gathers, when every reasonable voice counsels surrender, sometimes the answer is simply to rise, to grip your sword with hands that can barely feel, to mount your horse despite the pain, and to charge. Because in that charge lies the difference between extinction and survival, between surrender and victory, between being forgotten and being remembered forever.